Hi, my name's Stephen and I'm here today to speak about the loss of my left arm, my shoulder, my collarbone, 3 ribs and a proportion of my chest wall, and also the subsequent feeling of loss of my identity and the life I knew prior to my operation.
Hello you, and thanks for tuning in to the Silent Why podcast. We're on a mission to find 101 different types of loss and to hear from those that have experienced them. Is it possible to find hope in all kinds of loss? We're here to find out. I'm Claire Sands, and next to me is my lovely other half,
Chris. And in this episode, which is very nearly halfway through our count up to 101 losses, we're joined by Stephen Downes from Cornwall in England.
That's the lovely coastal bit that sticks out on the bottom left of the UK, where people flock for the holidays. It's also great for surfing, which brings us back to today's guest.
Stephen was diagnosed with Hodgkin's Lymphoma at the age of 22 in 1997 when he found a lump in his neck on Christmas Day. He went through intense radiotherapy, which got rid of it, and that was that, until he felt a new lump in the same place 25 years later.
Diagnosed as a myxofibrosarcoma, a rare kind of malignant cancerous tumour, Stephen was told he would need to have his left arm, shoulder and 3 ribs removed or the cancer would kill him.
No. So I can't lose my arm. I'm a surfer, mate. You can't take my arm off. I said, I'm my job. I need both my arms for my job. And I just remember Lieutenant Colonel Taylor stood at the back of the room and he just went, this will kill you.
He underwent a 14-hour operation to remove the cancer in August 2022 in Derriford Hospital. Derriford is a teaching hospital which has a Ministry of Defence hospital unit integrated into the facility, with military personnel working in medical roles there, hence the titles of Stephen's surgeons that he's going to mention later.
This is a very honest conversation about a very big, very recent loss and how Stephen's had to come to terms with the loss of his dominant arm, the learning curve that comes with a loss like this, how to learn to surf again, and how others react to it.
It's an elephant in the room for me where, like, on the playground, one parent in 12 months has spoken to me about what's going on. And I just find it really strange that just general curiosity. I think if I saw something, I'd be I'd ask, before the school holidays, you had 2 arms and you've come back in September, you've got 1 arm. Do you mind me asking what's happened?
Stephen also shares about how this hasn't been the hardest loss he's had to face in life, what mentality he's had towards the loss that keeps him going, and why he continues to persevere to do the things that he loves.
Hope's everything, isn't it? Prior to the operation, I was like, I am going to surf again. There's part of me that did question whether I'd be able to do it. Hope was massive, isn't it? I hoped prior to the operation that I would be able to see my wife and my kids. I hoped that, I would be able to see them growing up.
Even though Stephen has lost so much and his amputation has interrupted so many areas of life, including his passions such as his love of surfing, he's not necessarily sure he'd magic it back to normal if he could, and he shares why.
We end this conversation, as we do all of them, by asking Stephen what his Herman is.
If you have no idea what that is, check out the link in the show notes.
But we started this chat by asking Stephen to tell us a bit about what life was like for him in 2021 before he found the second lump.
Yeah, so 2021, I was employed as a telecoms engineer for a large national company. Really enjoyed my job, primarily worked just with one other guy, nice job in Cornwall. Just the year earlier, got back with a previous girlfriend of mine who, the more sensible version of me would have recognised that she was a keeper at the time. But anyway, we'd both come out of relationships and we happened to sort of get back together. She was living at up in Manchester at the time, so we sort of had a bit of a long-distance romance. And then 2021, she was looking at moving down. So my life was set to be all kind of complete, really, with somebody who I knew loved me. I had a nice steady job that I enjoyed doing, working with a great guy, and I was surfing all the time, really. Surf whenever I wasn't at work or whenever I didn't have my children, I'd be getting in the sea surfing.
You mentioned Manchester. I mean, you don't have a Cornish accent. I'm guessing you're from the northwest originally. So how long have you been in Cornwall for?
So I am from Bury, 8 miles as the crow flies from Manchester Town Hall, and I moved to Cornwall in 2010.
Goodness, that's 2 very different places.
Yeah, very, very different. I moved to Cornwall as a teacher, and then after 8 years of being a class teacher, I decided to leave and became a telecoms engineer, which is also a very different role.
And then and again, you mentioned, well, we'll get into this a whole lot, but surfing, was the surfing love and interest there when you were in Bury in Manchester, or did that come along when you moved down to near the sea in Cornwall?
Yeah, so in 1983, I think my parents emigrated to Australia. My dad's a civil engineer. My mum is a nurse, or was a nurse. And my mum got a job straight away, and my dad struggled to get a job. And what basically happened with me and my dad, we would spend a lot of time at the beach. And I just played at the beach. I played in the sea. And then you see people on surfboards, so you sort of, can I have a surfboard, please? You get the cheapest surfboard from, what was it called, Kmart. So we lived there for 2 years, and I just started surfing, and then we moved back in 1985. And for a few years, we'd come down to Cornwall on holiday for 2 weeks. And like most people who end up moving to Cornwall, in their formative years, they've been holidaying with their parents in Cornwall, and that seems to plant a seed in people that at some point they want to move back down. And I sold it to my partner at the time that, there's jobs in Cornwall. We can move to Cornwall, a lovely place for the kids to grow up. But the real reason was to be near the sea, to go surfing every day. That's the truth of it.
The first bout of cancer, that was way back, wasn't it? That was 20 plus years ago.
1998, so I still lived in Bury. And woke up Christmas Day morning, 1997, and just happened to touch my clavicle there and found a lump in my neck. Went to my mum and dad's on Christmas Day with my partner at the time. Said to my mum, I found a bit of a lump in my neck. And she was like, it'll be nothing serious, but, get yourself checked out, get yourself to the doctor. So I went to the doctor. They obviously knew straight away it was something suspicious. I think they did a biopsy. And then on February the 13th, Friday, February the 13th, I think I was 22, went into, it was all happened at the hospital where my mum worked, went in, sat down, there's a few people in the room, and the surgeon, he just went, you might want to go and get your mum for this. I was like, oh, right, why? So anyway, they said, you should come, mum. Walked back in, and they didn't tell me then that I had cancer. It was a bit of a strange one, really. They said, you've got Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was like, right, okay, what's that? And it can be treated possibly with medication, possibly with other treatments. And no one actually said, you've got cancer. They didn't say those. And I walked out. I said, so what are you telling me, mum? Well, you've got cancer, son. I went, what? She went, yeah, that lump, that's cancer. I went, well, am I going to die? She was like, no, you're not going to die. She was adamant. She's like, you are not going to die. And then it's pivotal to what happened to me, really, because I signed up for a trial to treat the Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you could either have a massive dose of radiotherapy, a massive dose of chemotherapy, or a mixture of the two. And I got a massive dose of radiotherapy. And subsequently, I think 1999, 2000, I was out in Australia, went to Australia for a year, and I was paranoid of it. Any lump, anything that twinge, I was straight to the doctor. I was like, I've got twinge, I've got twinge. I remember speaking to the doctors in Australia, and I said, I've had radiotherapy now. How many sessions did you do? I said, 20. He went, what, in a year? I went, no, in a month. He said, I'm surprised you're alive. And he went, wow, we would give 20 sessions of radiotherapy over a year. And I was like, oh, right, they'll only give it me in a month, Monday to Friday for 4 weeks. So cured the cancer, cured it. I've subsequently seen that the footballer David Brooks, who plays for Bournemouth, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at a similar age to me, I think. And I watched the programme about his diagnosis, his recovery, his treatment, and they had a lady on from Cancer Research UK, and she was talking about the treatment David Brooks had received. Nowhere in it did it mention radiotherapy. Now, whether that's come from those trials and they've realised that radiotherapy isn't great at treating Hodgkin's lymphoma, I don't know. But listening to her, there was no mention of treating Hodgkin's lymphoma with radiotherapy. But it worked for 25 years. I lived a perfectly healthy, normal life.
And then it came back. Tell us what happened in 2022.
Yeah, so my wife, as she is now, she moved down, so we rekindled our romance, long-distance romance. COVID came, made it really difficult. She was just like, I'm going to move to Cornwall. So I think January, February 2022, she moved down. A few weeks later, we'd arranged, we had all the kids, we're going to go to Pizza Express, have some food, go to Hendra, like water park nearby. And me and my son were at the top of the slide. He was a bit cold. I picked him up, and I just happened to touch my neck. and in exactly the same place as 25 years earlier was a lump in my neck. It felt exactly the same. So I went down the slide with my son, went to see she wasn't my wife then, but I said, I just found a lump in my neck in exactly the same place. Which was like, oh God, thanks for telling. Anyway, so fortunately I was off work the next day, went to the GPs, told, obviously they're aware of my medical history. He had a look at it, he went, that does look suspicious. So when I went to the hospital down here, they did an ultrasound on it, they looked at it, and they were like, right, we'll take a biopsy today. So they did 2 fine needle biopsies, and they had some sort of geneticist in the room with them because they were taking it out, and then she was looking at the cells, and she was going, no, I can't get a clear picture from that one, can't get a clear picture. Do you mind if you do another one? So they took another one. No, still can't get a clear picture. She's like, right, we're going to have to do what's called a core needle biopsy, a much thicker sample. Are you okay? Yeah, that's fine. And they said, we won't know the results of that for 2 to 3 weeks. I was like, right, okay. And then I went back to see the doctor who had seen, he did is it an endoscopy where they put a tube through your nose and down your throat? He was like, there's no sign of any throat cancer or anything like that. He went, but this looks really, really suspicious. And he went, with the treatment you've had, with what you've got, that might be a secondary cancer, and often it will also be present in either your lungs or your intestine. And I remember ringing my wife on the way home, and I was like, they said it might be a secondary cancer. And I didn't know at the time, it sounds ridiculous. I didn't know secondary cancers are not treatable. Secondary cancers, that's a death sentence. So 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. We're just about heading out the door to go to a place in between Newquay and Crantock called the Gannel. It's like a stream or river that flows out, and at high tide fills it in, and it's beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful spot. So we're literally just about to go out, get a phone call from the doctor, and he went, we know what it is. It's a sarcoma. I was like, right, what's that? And he went, it's a rare type of cancer. I was like, right, I've never heard of it. And he went, I said, what's the next stage? He went, we don't deal with it here. It's too rare for us. He said, we'll refer you to Derriford, where they've got a specialist sarcoma team. So I was like, right, oh, okay. Straight, obviously, I'm sure everyone would do it. Straight on your phone. I've never heard of sarcoma. Type sarcoma into my phone, start reading about it. And basically what I read was sarcomas are normally treated with surgery. And I thought, right, great. Feels the size of a golf ball. Brilliant. They'll whip this out. Like they did 25 years earlier. I went in, day surgery. They pulled out the tumour in my neck, stitched me up, and so I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to get away with this. Maybe they're just going to operate, they're going to take it out, stitch me up. The children are never going to need to know. So then we go up to Derriford, and I've got this theory about the NHS that I've put to the surgeons, and they've sort of debunked it. I said, the more people are in the room, the more serious your problem is. And he was, that's not the case. I went, well, there's 4 of you in the room. When I walked in that day at Derriford, in the run-up to it, I got letters saying who the surgeons I'll be seeing, and they're all sort of had these highfalutin naval titles. So the lead surgeon was Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard, and I'm thinking, what? The other surgeon on it was Lieutenant Colonel Chris Taylor. And I said to my wife, I said, well, why am I seeing plastic surgeons? I don't get it. They said I've got a rare cancer. Why am I seeing plastic surgeons? And then a couple of days before we were due to go, I got a phone call, and they were like, we'd like to go for another scan. And I was like, oh, wow, I've just had a scan done. And I would like to go for another one. Can you make it tomorrow? And I was like, well, that seems quite quick. And like, yeah, we'd like to get it done before you go up to Derriford on the Tuesday. So I got off the phone. I said to her, I'm scared. I said, they're ringing me up. Stuff like this doesn't happen at this speed unless they're concerned. I said to get a scan in the NHS, come tomorrow. I said, it doesn't feel right. Anyway, so we went up to Derriford, we met him, and Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard, he had a look of Hastings from Line of Duty. I don't know if you've ever watched Line of Duty, but he looked a bit like Hastings. And with his naval attire on, with his naval get-up, he had that kind of gravitas about him. And he was telling me all about the sarcoma, and he said it's big. I thought it was about the size of a golf ball. He went, no, it's big. It's going down to near your ribs. I was like, oh, right, okay. And he went, we think we can get it out. I was like, right, okay. He said, but to get it out, we want a margin of incision around it. We want 10 millimetres of good flesh, so it's encased within it. I was like, right. He said, looking at the scans, we don't know if we're going to be able to get 10 millimetres of good flesh around it. So we can do a marginal incision where, we might get 1 or 2 millimetres of flesh, but it's still, I was like, right, okay. that he's going on. And as he's speaking, I'm sort of looking at him thinking, there's three things going through my head. You look like Hastings from Line of Duty. This all sounds incredibly complicated. And there's a book coming here. And he went on and he was saying how to get it out and whatever. And then he just went, the far right possibility here is that you might lose your arm. I was like, what? No. So I can't lose my arm. Genuinely, I went, I'm a surfer, mate. You can't take my arm off. I said, I'm my job. I need both my arms for my job. And I just remember Lieutenant Colonel Taylor stood at the back of the room and he just went, this will kill you. And it's like, right, okay. When they say something of that magnitude, it's almost like a nuclear bomb goes off in your head. You know, it's like, just what? And you can't think anything, but you're thinking 1,000 things at the same time, if that makes sense. Your mind's absolutely right. Anyway, so they sort of said to me, right, we're going to send you for another scan on Friday, and we want to get a much clearer picture. And the nature of the sarcoma I had, it was so sarcoma is a rare subtype of cancer that affect the bone and soft tissue. Like I say, they're rare, and I had what's called a myxofibrosarcoma, which is a rare subtype of cancer. And they sort of described it to me like a jellyfish. He said it's not like a blob. He said it's got like tendrils coming out of it, and he said they're all wrapped around your nerves, your blood, your blood vessels, your muscles. I was like, right, okay. So anyway, they sent me for another scan on a Friday night of Tralis, and I get there, and there's only me there and the radiographer or whatever he is doing the scanning. I told him, I said, they're saying they're going to amputate my arm, and I said, I need you to find something on this scan doesn't necessitate the amputation of my arm. He's like, do you want some music on? I'm like, I'm not really bothered, mate. He said, you're probably going to be in there for an hour and a half. He said, it's really detailed scan we're going to do. I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, he puts Radio 2 on, Sarah Cox, I think it was, and a friend of mine, he was the drummer in the band Elbow, and as I get in the tunnel, the MRI thing, the scanner, I'm lying there, and he starts, and one day like this, by Elbow came on, and I thought, this is a sign. This is a sign. One day like this is going to be the day where I find out that they're not going to amputate my arm. So anyway, it does all the scans, and I get out, and he went, I've got the money shot. I went, oh, right, brilliant. He said, I've got the money shot. I've got a really clear picture of it. I was like, brilliant, fantastic. So I drive home, and I think my mum rang me, and I went, Mum, he said he's got the money shot. I said, I told him what was going on. He wouldn't say that unless he knew that he'd seen something that meant I didn't have to have my arm amputated. She went, well, he might just have mean he's got a really clear picture to show them what's going on. I went, why would he say he'd got the money shot? So I tried to manifest positivity over the week, going, they are going to find something that means I do not need to have my arm amputated. Didn't work. So we go back the following Tuesday to Derriford, and we could hear the surgeon, we could hear him in the room next door sort of laughing. And I was looking at my wife going, they're laughing. They must mean that it's not as serious as they thought. Why would they be laughing? Anyway, they come in. There's another surgeon with him this time, Mr. Adrian Marchbank. And he went, how do you feel about what you were told last week? And I went, well, you said I might lose my arm. He went, yeah, you are going to lose your arm and your shoulder and your collarbone, 3 of your ribs and a proportion of your chest wall. And I remember my wife turning to him going, so we're going far right then. We're not just going far right, we're going far right. And it was a strange one, that, because on the previous Tuesday when they told me, I broke down, I was sobbing my eyes out. And the second time when they told me that it was actually happening, it was just like, right, okay, right, what's the choice, you know? And they had so it's like a multidisciplinary approach to surgery. So they were plastic surgeons, and their field of expertise was piecing guys together who'd been blown up in Iraq and blown up in Afghanistan. And he was like, this surgery pioneered piecing guys back together who stepped on IEDs, who've whatever. And after that, I don't think I'll ever understand what happened if it's that big. But a friend of mine, a good mate of mine, his brother, I'm doing a lot of name dropping here, a drummer from Elbow, and a lad I went to school with is Sean in Coronation Street, Anthony. And he somehow has ended up doing a load of work with soldiers, sailors, Air Force Families Association, SAFA, I think it's called. And he's done a load of work with servicemen, returning servicemen. And he's like, I think he's got an MBA or an OBE for his work with helping returning servicemen. And I hadn't spoke to Anthony since school, really. I've maybe bumped into him now and again. And he just messaged me out of the blue. And he was like, my brother's told me what's going on, and I want to help you out. And I can only say that he was like a guardian angel. There was days where the weight of it on you, bearing in mind, this is probably the first week of July. And my wife said to him, when are you looking to do the surgery? He went August the 4th. And my wife went, whoa, why? Why so soon? That doesn't give us any time to find a second opinion. She said, is it getting near his heart? They went, no, it's getting near his lungs. And if it gets in his lungs, that's it. We can't do anything. And at the time, just over 3 weeks, I was like, well, why are we going to find a second opinion? I've got 3 weeks to find a way out of this. And I think he did say to me, there is no easy way out of this for you. And so Anthony would message me on day, I don't know how he did it. He just had this sixth sense of whenever I was struggling, I'd get a message off him. And one of the things he said to me was, let go of the fear. It weighs too much and you can't carry it. And that sounds like a bit of a throwaway line, but that, I don't know what it was about that sentence he said, but it was like, right, okay, yeah. And all that I said, I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid I'm going to die on the operating table. Anthony's like, he said, these guys know what they're doing. And he said, you're not waking up in a dust bowl in Afghanistan having to get helicoptered to surgery. He said, they're in charge from the moment you go under. There's no curveballs coming their way. They know what they're doing. They are in charge. So he said, as hard as it is, the news you've been given, he said, at least you've got time to get your head around it. If you're a guy out in Afghanistan, Iraq or whatever, and you stand on an IED or whatever, boom, you waking up. If you wake up, you're waking up and you're looking at the bits. He said, at least you know. And he said, you can start to practice living with one arm. And he said, you will have a perfectly happy life. Trust me. And by the final week, not in a bullish way, not full of bravado. He was like, I just want to get this done now. Let's just go and do it. And whatever will be, will be. And the hardest thing about it was, if I died on the operating table, I wasn't going to know. They did tell me afterwards, said they trusted him when to do this operation. We had to fight for it. We thought you were fit enough and healthy enough to survive the operation, and we really fought for this. But the thought of what that would leave behind for my wife and, my parents, my children, you're none the wiser, are you, if you die when you've gone under? It's what's left behind. So I remember on the day of the surgery, I thought, because, I'm having this massive life-saving surgery, 14-hour surgery with 4 different surgical teams. But we got there at 6:30 in the morning, and I thought everyone would be like, oh, hi, Stephen. Well, come on onto it. There was a queue of people getting onto this. It was like a triage for surgery. It was like a cattle market. And there must have been 30 people queuing. And we queued up, and they weren't going to let my wife in because they were like, no, because of COVID. They were like, no, it's only the person. She's like, no, I'm coming in. I'm not leaving him. Anyway, so the surgeons came, and Professor Rickard gets a great big marker pen out. And I go, what's that for? You're not putting an arrow on me, are you, or a neck? Marks a spot. He went, yeah, we are. He went, but we don't want to chop the wrong arm off, do we? I was like, no, you don't. So he drew a great big arrow on me, and he's like, do you agree that's the arm? I went, yeah, that's the arm. But I was like, I thought they'd be a bit more technical than that. Didn't realise they'd just be marking me with a biro. But yeah, the anaesthetist came in, and she held my hand, the anaesthetist. She held my hand down the corridor, and she was like, "You all right?" I said, "No, I'm terrified. I'm so scared. I can't tell you how scared I am." And then I think there's 3 anaesthetists, and one of the guys, he was like, "You okay?" I said, "No, I'm terrified. I'm really scared. I'm going to go under, and I'm not going to wake up." And he was like, "You're going to wake up. Don't you worry about it." And then I think so that was the Thursday. The Friday morning, Mr. Marchbank came to see me, and he was like, "Surgery went really well. It went better than we could have expected." I was like, all right. He went, "We've got a really good margin of incision around it." He said, "We've probably got 20 millimetres around it." He said, "So we've got it all out." I was like, all right, fantastic. And if they hadn't got it all out, if they thought there was any left, I would have either had to have a bit of radiotherapy, a bit of chemotherapy.
How long was the period of time between the appointment where you were told we're going to need to amputate to waking up in hospital having had the surgery? How long a gap was
From
that?
the first time they said I might lose my arm, that would have been about 4.5 weeks. The whole thing, from finding a lump in my neck at Hendra, was just under 10 weeks.
God.
Yeah, and it happened at such breakneck speed almost that I only think now that I'm starting to maybe process it, if that makes sense. And there's still a part of me that feels like this happened to somebody else. That I'm like a voyeur on watching this happen to someone. I know it happened to me because I've only got one arm, but there's part of it that's not as bad as you think it would be, because you recover, you get better. I was out of hospital within 10 days. I think on day 11, my son came and he's like, "Can you make a Hot Wheels track with me, Dad?" And it's like, yeah, okay, but I don't know how I'm going to do it because I've only got one hand. But returning to normality like that, you know, your child just seeing you exactly as you were before. "Dad, I want to make a Hot Wheels track. Can you make some Lego with me, Dad?" I didn't want my kids to be the ones growing up without their dad. My son was 5 years old when I told him. My daughter was 12. And my daughter's reaction was, "Oh, cool, Dad, you'll be like Iron Man. Will you get like a robotic arm?" And I was like, "No, there's no robotic arms." She's like, "Oh, yeah, but you'll be like Iron Man." I'm like, "Well, I'm not entirely sure I will."
I'm sort of just trying to imagine, you know, what it would be like, and there's the emotional side of it of, well, you know, this is my arm and that's not going to be there anymore, and trying to get your head around that. But then there's obviously the practical side of not being able to do things in the same way that you did them before and everything being a lot harder. I have trouble imagining which of those is going to be the hardest to get through, or is it like a joint thing as they kind of work together? What is the hardest bit of coming to terms with something like this?
It's your loss of self, I would say. Everything that my life was gone in 10 weeks, really. Well, that's not true, is it? Because my wife loved me. I've got the love of my parents, my kids. But, so, you know, I've surfed for 40 years and, you know, I wasn't going surfing. And when I got out of hospital, I was sort of thinking, right, I'm going to go down the beach. As soon as I'm out of hospital, I'm going down the beach. I'm feeling the sand between my toes. I'm looking at the sea. And the reality was, when I got out of hospital, probably slept solidly for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I didn't want to impose more upon my wife. I didn't want her to have to do more than she already did. So I was quite set on doing things myself from the start. But you're dead right that when I like a bagel in the morning, the first few times I tried to butter a bagel and you're just chasing the bagel across the breadboard with the knife, I remember standing in the kitchen going, "I can't live like this. I cannot live like this. There's no way I can live like this." But then maybe 3 months later, I remember buttering a bagel and it was second nature. Like, "Oh, I've just done that." You do adapt. You've got two choices, haven't you? You either adapt to it and think, "I'm alive. I am so lucky. I am alive." In those first 2 weeks, I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to go out. And I remember a really good mate of mine. I'm more of a texter than a ringer, so he texted me and I didn't reply to his text. I think he texted me again, I didn't reply. Then he rang me to switch my phone off. No, didn't answer. Then he rang me again, switched my phone off. And then maybe 10 minutes later, there's like banging at the door. Not going to leave me alone. So I went down and I'm like, "All right, mate, what do you want?" He went, "I want you to come outside." I went, "I'm not going outside, mate. I am not stepping out of the house. I don't want anyone to see me. I cannot face the world." And he just went, "I don't want to break it to you, mate." He went, "But no one cares what you look like. Everyone's too busy with their own life." And I went, "Oh." So I'm really lucky where we live. We live 20 metres, 30 metres from the cliff edge in Newquay. So it was like, just walk to the edge, just walk to the narrow cliff with me, just look out over the sea. Come on. So we walked out, we walked there. And he went, "Look, no one cares, mate. No one's looking at you." And I was like, "Yeah." And I look back at that, and that was, you know, that got me out of the house for the first time. I think everything's a first, isn't it? It's like, right, I've got to get out of the house, and then got to get out the house on my own. And because of the phantom limb pain, my arm is stuck at a right angle, my left arm. And you're walking down the street, and it feels as though your arm is stuck at a right angle, sticking out. My brain's thinking, everyone can see me, I look an idiot. My arm's sticking out at a ridiculous right angle. But it's like, well, no one can see your arm, mate. It's been chopped off. It's just in your head.
That's fascinating. So, like, sort of straight out?
No, so like that.
Oh, okay, in front of you.
And then I asked one of the surgical team, one of them came to see me a few times, and one of the final days before I got discharged, I said, "My arm's stuck at a right angle." I said, is that because where they would have severed the nerve? And that's the sort of the last signal that my brain sent out to my hand. So how that would make sense, she said, because in surgery, your arm was either up there like that. And she did say, she went, you're lucky it's not stuck up there, really, aren't you? And I was like, well, yeah, I suppose. I'll take that. It is better that it's stuck down by my side, not above my head. They've tried me on all sorts of different drugs. So some of them have had a really negative effect on me. Some of them have really been in a quite a dark place. So thankfully, I'm not taking them anymore.
One of the things that we ask all of our guests is what their relationship with the question why has been. Have you struggled with asking why me at all? Is that something that crosses your mind?
Yeah, very much so. So I kept myself relatively healthy. I wasn't a temple of health, but I kept myself a lot healthier than some people. And certainly when you're swimming and you see people who are really, really quite unhealthy, I will say to my wife, and I'll point at them and say, I get my arm cut off. There is an element of it that seems cancer is unfair, isn't it? Cancer is a really cruel, horrible disease. It doesn't care about your socio-economic status. It doesn't care about your age. It doesn't care about anything. So there is an element, there really is, of why did this happen to me? But the more I learn about sarcoma, and sarcomas are notoriously difficult to detect, they're notoriously difficult to treat, and they're often only detected when they're too late. So people often, by the time they found it, it's got to the lungs, it's spread. So there is an element that I feel like I'm lucky, actually. I'm one of the lucky ones who, had I not found, there was no telltale signs of feeling ill. Didn't feel unwell. But the one thing there was when I go to sleep at night, I'd get really bad. Sometimes I get really bad pins and needles in my left arm. And then one of the surgeons asked me that on either the first or second time he met. He went, do you have any tingling in your arm at night? And I sort of paused. Because at that point I was trying to think, I'm getting out of this without getting my arm cut off. And I went, yeah, I do. Why? He went, we think that's the tumour pressing on your blood vessels when you're lying down. And he said, and that's what's cutting the blood off to your arm. That's what's giving you the pins and needles sensation. And that was a bit... And then when I started to think about that, I'd been having pins and needles on and off in my arm for maybe 4 or 5 years. Only very intermittently at first, but by 2022, it was probably, maybe 5 nights a week. I've been really struggling to get to sleep because of the sensation in my arm.
Come back to the friend that, knocked on the door. That's all part of the journey of, to use the sort of cliche, almost coming to terms with, we're only, not even 2 years on from this major change for you. What's the experience been like for you of coming to terms with what has happened?
I've been really, really lucky. I have been able to accept what's happened. And I think that's a really big part of it, isn't it? Accepting. And like I say, I understand why I had a tumour the size of a can of baked beans growing from my clavicle down to and had that not been removed, I wouldn't be alive. I'm not going to say, I've cried an incredible amount. I still do. I can be having a perfectly happy day. I'll just become overcome by him. I'll just be overcome by emotion and just find myself sobbing. And I guess that's trauma. That's just. I started doing acupuncture, and she's like, "Oh, one of the things acupuncture is good at releasing trauma." And she said, "You must have so much trauma, or you're carrying so much trauma." She said, "I can feel it in and around your neck, so tight." I think I'd accepted what was happening the week before surgery, and I knew I was coming out with one arm. But I also knew that I wanted my response to it to be a positive one, primarily for my children, so they could see how I dealt with, how I reacted to something of the magnitude that happened, and that hopefully they can see that. And when my dad had his arm cut off, he got on with it. So I've met some amazing people over the last 12 months that I wouldn't have met. I wouldn't be sat here speaking to you two. I've met some truly incredible people over the last 12 months. And I've said to a few people that if a fairy godmother came down and said to me tomorrow, right, you can have your arm back tomorrow, you have your own life back tomorrow, I genuinely don't know if I'd take it because of the direction this has pushed me in. But it's easy to say that, isn't it? If she actually floated down tomorrow and went, there it is, there's your arm, you can have it back. Would I be saying no? I don't know, but it's been an incredible journey that I've been on. And like I say, I've met so many incredible people. So we were up at a festival up at Woolacombe, and I'm quite open, obviously, about what's happened. And the guy I sort of half know next to me, and I said, it's amazing. People are opening up with telling me these really incredible stories about their lives. I said, it's really touching to hear. And he went, yeah, but that's because you're so open about what's happened. He said, your openness encourages other people to speak about what's going on for them. I was like, oh, yeah, I'd never seen it like that. He said, what you do, the way you speak about it, empowers other people to think they can speak about. I think unless you're very, 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 very fortunate human being, none of us go through life without experiencing some pain, some trauma, some loss, some grief. That's part of the package of life, isn't it? You have to accept that is all part of life, to enjoy beautiful sunsets, to enjoy, walks in the lake, whatever your thing is. We all go through loss, don't we? We all go through grief, trauma, pain. That's, unfortunately, that's part of the package of life, isn't it?
Had you been through other losses before this that had helped with this journey?
Yeah, so I've got 2 children, and unfortunately I'm separated from both the mums. And coming to terms with the separation, the forced separation really from your children, is one of the hardest things I think you could ever face in your life. From waking up every morning with your kids, and some mornings when my son's an early riser, he won't think anything of getting up at 5:30 in the morning. And when you're in that moment, when you're up at 5:45 and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired, you don't think you'll miss it. But when it's taken away from you, you sort of crave being woken up at 6 o'clock by, you can hear little feet running in and going, Daddy, Daddy, I'm up. And I don't want to go back to bed. No, I'm awake. Okay, let's get up. And, putting him to bed at night. And same with my daughter, the separation from them has been really, really hard to take. And that's where I first started having counselling, where I first had, I've had various counselling. And what I've learned, I think people who are struggling and you get counselling suggested to you, it's not a panacea. It's not going to make the pain go away. It doesn't make the hurt go away. It just gives you a means of dealing with it, of coping with it. And I think that's what I've learned through various counselling, that the pain of trauma you can't just magic it away. You have to accept it, you have to own it, and you have to kind of adapt to it, don't you? I think that's one of the main things I've learned, is about adapting.
One of the things about loss of a limb is that it's an obvious loss, isn't it? People will look at you and they will see what you've lost physically. And that must be very difficult, because you're thrown into the situation of maybe them talking about it or them deciding not to talk about it, whether you want to or not. A lot of people's losses you can hide, or they're just bereavements that you can sort of not talk about if you choose to, or even lie about if you want to, but you can't really avoid that. And I think when you see somebody without a limb, your brain does sort of want to fill in that gap. So there probably is a moment, whether we want to or not, of staring, not, trying to be rude looking, but you think your brain's like, there's something missing there. Do you find that people, do they talk about it with you, or do they tend to avoid it? What is the sort of reaction you get from other people?
Such a good question. I think people are afraid to ask. I think people are afraid to actually acknowledge it. And I don't know if you've heard of Bethany Hamilton, but she's a surfer, and when she was a teenager, she lost her arm in a shark attack. And I read somewhere that Bethany Hamilton said, you should never ask an amputee the reason behind why they're an amputee. And I sort of disagree with that, because it's an elephant in the room for me, where, like, on the playground, one parent in 12 months has spoken to me about what's gone on. And I just find it really strange that just general curiosity. I think if I saw something, I'd be I'd ask, before the school holidays, you had 2 arms, and you've come back in September, you've got 1 arm. Do you mind me asking what's happened? But I think people are scared to ask. Kids are brilliant, because kids will just go, you've got 1 arm. We go, yeah, I have. And the mums or the dads will go, well, I'm really sorry. I said, no, it's fine, I've got 1 arm. They're only pointing out the blindingly obvious. There is a sense of unease. You're dead right that I've said this to people, that If I saw someone walking down the street, if I had two arms and I saw someone walking down the street with one arm, my natural reaction would be to do a double take, going, so you got one arm? Because you don't see a lot of people with one arm, do you?
No.
You see, there's more people who've lost a bit of a leg who have, and you can get really cool engineered prosthetic limbs now, can't you? See, there's far more lower limb amputees. So I'm not offended or I'm not upset by people staring. Staring is not the right word, because, like I say, they do a double take, like, oh, he's got one arm. But I would do the same. I think it's human curiosity, isn't it? To, oh, what's that? Very few people offer to help, and that's fine, because I don't. It's not that I don't want your help, and I think there's a misconception around why people with a disability don't want your help. I don't want your help because I can't be reliant on people. Like, I can't be reliant on people to tie my shoelaces for me. So the first few weeks, my wife has tied my shoelaces until I figured out how to do it. But they'd come undone in town. And you're not just going to stop a random stranger and say, excuse me, can you tie my shoelaces, please? I can't do it. And the same with zipping up my coat. And I think one of the only people who's ever offered to help me is a little old lady in Sainsbury's, because obviously to undo a bottle, like a Coke bottle or whatever, you haven't got two hands. So you have to kind of clamp the bottle between, this is my technique anyway, clamp the bottle between my feet and then unscrew it. I was just about to do it, and an old lady walked past. She must have been over 70. She was like, can I help you there, dear? I was like, no, genuinely really appreciate you offering. And I will always say to people, if they say, do you need a hand? I'll say, no, but I genuinely am grateful that you've offered. I do appreciate it, but it's just something I've got to do. And it's not because I don't want people. There's certain things I'll say, can you help me with that? But the prime thing is, unless I can do it myself, you're reliant on other people. And unless you're going to have like an entourage behind me, like, that's my shoe tire, that's my coat zipper upper, that's my bottle undoer. You've got to learn yourself, haven't you? That's my take on it.
What sort of impact would you ideally like to have, whether it was on individuals, on groups, if you were, sharing something of your experience? What effect would you really love your story to have on other people, whether it's somebody in the playground or a group of people that you're addressing?
I did an assembly in a school, and it was of me surfing, and the first few waves I didn't catch. The next few I nearly caught. The next few I got a bit closer, and the final waves I stood up on. And afterwards, one of the children, but maybe before the video, one of the children said, have you stood up? Can you stand up on a surfboard? And I said, no, not yet. And at the end, the head teacher went, the most powerful bit in that assembly, children, was when Mr. Downs said, not yet. I left and I thought, oh, wow, yeah. And that's Carol C. Dweck, who was an educational psychologist. She came up with the power of yet. So I've been doing a few assemblies in schools, and I think that's the message I'll try to get over, that you don't have to succeed at something the very first time you do it. You don't even have to succeed at the 10th time or the 20th time or the 100th time. You can just keep going, and eventually you will get there. And I think that's what I would like my assemblies, and if I speak to other people, to be about, that. Give yourself time, be kind to yourself, but be determined, and you can achieve. Like once you start, the algorithm on Instagram, once you start clicking on one person with disability doing something amazing, it starts to open up a whole. I've seen a guy climbing Everest with no legs. You can achieve whatever you want to achieve, but just give yourself time.
How long was it after the operation that you were back on a surfboard then?
So first got in the sea after 6 months. And me and my daughter went out, and it was brilliant because it was a lovely sunny day, end of February last year. Nice clean waves, and I just messaged my daughter saying, I'm going to get in the sea. Do you want to come in with me? She was like, yeah. So we went in. I wasn't trying to stand up. I was just literally, it was just about being in the sea, about catching some waves. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I got a knee board, and I was on it. And at the time, it seemed such a long time I'd been out of the water because, like I say, I'd surf every day if I could prior to the operation. So 6 months out of the water seemed like an incredible amount of time. But when I look back now, it's like, wow, 6 months after that operation, I was getting back in the sea. And I probably started, by about sort of April time, I was getting my head around it. I was able to catch waves. And then I think in June, we went up to the wave in Bristol. Went with two good mates of mine, and we went for the weekend. We had 3 surfs. The first surf on the Saturday, I did okay. I got about 50% of the waves I went for. Second surf, my mate was on the inside, and he saw me get a wave, and he went, mate, you're the best surfer in the pool. He said, watching you, you're absolutely flying. He went, mate, I can't believe what I'm watching. And that was like the best surf I'd had. And the next day I thought, I'm not going to be able to replicate. And I had an even better surf the next day. And people coming up to me afterwards, like, mate, that's incredible. And to me, it's just surfing. It's just doing the thing I like to do. And I think that's one of the things that I find with kids, where you try and say, oh, you can learn maths. You've got to really want to do it. The fact I've learned to surf again is because I really like surfing and I really wanted to do it. And there was nothing, well, I say there was not, if the operation hadn't gone as well as it had, if I'd had a load of radiotherapy, a load of chemotherapy, that might have just destroyed my body. So I am fortunate that, yes, they've amputated my arm, but I've been interviewing some guys who've had cancer for the company I work for, and the treatment they've had has left them completely debilitated. There's no way, if I'd have been through what they'd have been through, I'd have been getting in the sea even now, I don't think. But yeah, it was about 6 months after surgery that in.
And, we use this podcast to explore lots of different types of loss to see, can hope exist? Where does hope exist in all these different types of loss? So in your experience, how hopeful have you been throughout? How has hope featured in your story?
Hope's everything, isn't it? Hope is the ability to dream, I guess, isn't it? Prior to the operation, I was like, I am going to surf again. There's part of me that did question whether I'd be able to do it. Yeah, hope's massive, isn't it? Because, I hope prior to the operation that I would be able to see my wife and my kids. I hoped that, I will be able to play Hot Wheels again. My son's just getting into starting playing football. So I hope to be around for them. I hope to see them growing up. I hope to surf again. That's the ability to dream, isn't it? Hope allows you to dream.
One thing I just want to ask, is there one practical thing that affects you day to day that is still incredibly frustrating, or have you just adjusted to everything?
Yeah, trying to get your trousers on with one hand is difficult. For some reason, you often start putting a leg and you're like, no, it's back to front. And that's one of the things that I've been putting out some videos on YouTube of people said, oh, I quite like the videos you do where you show how you do things with one hand. And one of the things would be putting my trousers on, but I'm not sure that people want to see me putting my trousers on, do they, with one hand? Most things I've adapted to, really. Like driving, obviously you can't just drive a car, that's how the vehicle adapted, but yeah, my surfboard's been adapted. But other than that, like I use a normal laptop, you just get used to sort of spreading your fingers out. But if you have to do Control-Alt-Delete is really difficult. I have to hold a pencil in my mouth. Oh, and opening a can, using a can opener is impossible. My wife went away last November and I went round to a mate of mine's and his wife made us tuna mayonnaise sandwiches. There's a lovely tuna mayonnaise sandwich. And I went home and I thought, I really fancy a tuna mayonnaise sandwich, another one. And I looked at the cans and none of them had a ring pull on. And I thought, right, well, I'm not going to be beaten here. I'm not going to let this prevent me having my tuna mayonnaise sandwich. And I thought I was being really resilient. Anyway, I struggled with the tin opener. I had it under my chin. I was holding it with my feet. I was doing all sorts. And eventually I did it and I made the tuna mayonnaise sandwich. And afterwards I thought, first I was like, that's brilliant. So resilient, aren't you? Wow, what a warrior you are. And I thought, no, that was nonsense. You spent 30 minutes there opening a can. I lived 2 minutes from a Tesco Express. I could have just walked to Tesco Express and got some tuna with a ring pull. That would have been the smarter way of doing it, wouldn't it? Rather than struggling and making life hard for myself. Why make life difficult when just walk to Tesco Express?
Think it taste better, though, because of the effort you put in to get to
the
it?
resilience.
Yeah. No, it did. Yeah, it did, yeah.
Well, it's really well done, because I think it was today, actually, earlier today, just completely coincidentally, I saw a post on Instagram of, one of these accounts that sort of puts out good news or just inspiring bits that they see other people posting. And somebody had posted, and they'd reposted this, of someone just posting a small account of, I was in the supermarket, saw someone buying like a bag of shredded lettuce, thought to myself, who on earth needs shredded lettuce? What a lazy thing. Who needs to just shred your own lettuce at home? But then there was something where they actually realised, not everyone can shred their own lettuce. That might be a really, really helpful thing for somebody that can't hold a ball of iceberg lettuce and then, use a knife to cut it. So I think it's really healthy just to be aware of this stuff.
And I think they are. The videos you see, I saw the one of you buttering, showing you how you butter things. I think that is really interesting. People do want to see that stuff. It gives us a taste of, we have it quite easy with a lot of stuff, and it's good to not take things for granted. So I can see why people really enjoy just seeing what that looks like.
Yeah, I get quite a lot of positive messages about that, where people have said, you know what, I was having a rubbish day, and then I watched that video of you buttering that bread, and I just thought, he's getting on with it. I should get on with it. And it's really nice when people message you stuff like that. When people go, you're inspiring, mate, you're an inspiration. You're like, I'm not, I'm just doing things I like doing.
Well, ask our final question. It's been such a delight to be able to talk with you. So thank you for inspiring us, sharing everything that you have. Really, really loved it. And let's finish, Stephen. We want to hear, what's your Herman?
Yeah, so I've given a bit of thought to this, and I'm stealing something that I've heard someone else say. It was a lady who's one of them marathon endurance runners or ultra marathon runners who's had her legs amputated below the knee, I think. And she said her special power was her ability to endure. And that really resonated with me. And I think through the separation from my children, through having cancer, as you know, my wife said it to me the other day. She went, "You've lived with the spectre of cancer throughout your entire adult life, basically." And I think that my Herman is the ability to endure. And when I read your descriptions of what a Herman is, it's not something that can be bought. It's not something you can get from the shop. It's something that you acquire through loss, through pain, through grief, through heartache. And I think what I've learned is that I can endure quite a lot. And I think that's the message that I would probably like to pass on to people, that, you know, I didn't think that I would be able to cope with the amputation of my arm. When they told me my arm was going, I did not think I would be able to deal with this. But I have. And my life is, you know, I'm really lucky. My life has gone back to not far off what it used to be, really. And I think we all probably are able to endure a lot of hardship to get to the enjoyment of life.
Endurance. I'm sure you know what it's like to endure something. But also, like Stephen said, maybe you know what it's like to find enjoyment after the enduring. It's not uncommon to find that the joy you experience after loss is actually because of the loss itself. This is why you'll often hear our guests say that some of the best bits about life now have come through and because of their grief. Almost like the two become intertwined and inseparable.
Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your story. To find out more about him, he's on Instagram and has a podcast called Chopped: Strength Through Vulnerability. We'll put links to both of those in the show notes. We also have another episode that we did early in our podcast series with a guy called Dan Richards, who was in a nasty motorbike crash and woke up to find he'd lost his right arm and shoulder and his military career. We'll put a link in the show notes to that too. For more about us, visit thesilentwhy.com online or at thesilentwhypod on social media.
And you can support the show through buymeacoffee.com/thesilentwhy as a one-off tip for my hard work, or by helping to support me monthly. You can also now buy a Herman to send to someone who's going through a hard time. Sometimes it's really difficult to know what to say to people who are facing loss, as demonstrated in our chat with Stephen. Flowers don't always seem right and don't last long. Candles and chocolates can feel a bit girly, but Hermans, well, they say everything that you want to convey. I might not have the words for you right now, but I don't want you to feel like you're alone. For more information on these handmade grief companions, visit thehermancompany.com, where you'll find all the information you ever wanted on Hermans.
We're finishing this episode, like we do with all of our loss chats, with a quote, this time from Carol Dweck, who Stephen mentioned earlier from her book Mindset: The New Psychology of Success.
Why waste time proving over and over how great you are, when you could be getting better? Why hide deficiencies instead of overcoming them? Why look for friends or partners who will just shore up your self-esteem instead of ones that will also challenge you to grow? And why seek out the tried and the true instead of experiences that will stretch you? The passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of growth mindset. This is the mindset that allows people to thrive during some of the most challenging times in their lives.